Jai Gopi Janavallabha Jai Giridharadhari Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Jai Kunja Vihari Yamunatiravanachari Jai Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Vihari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Jai Giridharadhari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Jai Giridharadhari Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Jai Kunja Vihari Yamunatiravanachari Jai Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Vihari Namo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parabhacharya Asasarasata His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Adar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories, all glories. to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. So today we're looking at verse 31. This is from the canto number 10, chapter 44, verse 31, which was very briefly introduced in the previous class for just a couple of minutes, and not even there was enough time to read all the commentaries. So let's go ahead and examine this verse, because this verse is full of potentiality, and we will see why. Ateshu malavareshu vedruteshu chabojarat nyavarayat swaturyani vakyam chedam uvachaha ateshu malavareshu vedruteshu chabojarat Nyavarat Swaturyani Navarayat Swaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha Hateshu Malavareshu Vedruteshu Chabojarat Nyavarayat Swaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha. Devotees. Ateshu Malavareshu Vidruteshu Chabhojarat Nyavarayat Svaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha Ateshu Malavareshu Vidruteshu Chabhojarat Nyavaraya Svaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha Ateshu Malavareshu Vidruteshu Chabhojarat Nyavaraya Svaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha Ateshu Malavareshu Vidruteshu Chabhojarat Nyavaraya Svaturyani Vakyam Chedam Uvachaha. Synonyms. Ateshu, being killed. Malavareshu, the best wrestlers. Vidruteshu, having run away. Cha, and Bhojarat, the Bhoja king Kamsa. Nyavarayat, stopped. Swa, his own. Turyani, musical instruments. Vakyam, words. Cha, and. Idam, these. Uvachaha, spoke. Translation. The Bhoja king, seeing that his best wrestlers had all been killed or had fled, stopped the musical performance originally meant for his pleasure and spoke the following words. We can read together. The Bhoja king, seeing that his best wrestlers had all been killed or had fled, stopped the musical performance originally meant for his pleasure and spoke the following words. So there is no commentary from the BBT. There's no commentary from the devotees, disciples of Srila Prabhupada. But we have a commentary by Srila Jiva Goswami and another one by Srila Sanatana Goswami. Omagyanatimirandasya Chakshu Nityanyan. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dinavanda Jagat, Krishna Gopi, Radha Tapta Kanchana Golden, Radhi Vrindavan, Rishavanus Purvi Pranam, Vanchakalpataruyascha, Kripa Sindhu Yevacha, Patitanam Pavanevyo, Vaishnavevyo, Namo Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this verse deals with how Kamsa, who is completely terrified because he's seen all these wrestlers being very nonchalantly killed and eliminated by these youthful personalities, Krishna and Balaram, but these young boys, tender age, tender spirit, tender bodies, and tender all around, have defeated all these wrestlers. They have killed them all in the most elegant manner, simple and elegant. So he is very, very upset, extremely angry, and totally fearful because he knows that his turn is next. He's already been, since the beginning, always meditating on the Supreme Lord, and with hatred and with animosity and with fear and with terror. And it is said in the scriptures, and I don't have the verse in front of me, that the intensity of the enemies of the Supreme Lord is so great that it supersedes the intensity of the lovers of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the complete absorption and dedication in hatred of the Supreme Lord is so powerful that it's even more powerful than the dedication of those who lovingly address the Supreme Lord and keep the Lord in their hearts. So Srila Jiva Goswami is saying, he stopped the music which he had commissioned, Swaturyani, not the Devata music, which he could not stop, since he had lost his powers now. Or he could not stop the music which played by itself. Sometimes Sa is seen instead of Swa. Vishnu Purana explains that the music had stopped previously. So here, Jiva Goswami is saying that the music could not be stopped. He stopped his musicians, but the devatas were having a great time playing music up in the celestial regions and could be heard. But also, the music could not be stopped, period, because the instruments kept playing. And when I first heard this a couple of days ago, somebody was making a reference, I think it was Mother Krishna Priya, was making a reference to the music not being able to be stopped. I was imagining how the musicians, not the musicians, but the instruments, were in such delight producing this music, which was intentional for the pleasure of Kamsa, but actually addressing it to the Supreme Lord. I haven't found a reference to this. It was just my own personal sentiment that the instruments were so enthralled by the worship they were doing of the Supreme Lord with their beautiful melodies that they couldn't stop. They couldn't stop. It was impossible for them to stop. And not what to say about the devatas who were just playing on and on and on, and not necessarily for the pleasure of Kansa, but for the pleasure of all the devotees of the Supreme Lord, especially for Sri Krishna and Balaram. So, continuing with Srila Jiva Goswami, seeing the destruction of Chanura's strength and the increase of Krishna's strength, Kamsa, full of anger, stopped the music. When the mridangas and other instruments stopped at that moment, in the sky, the devatas, many instruments began to sound together. It may seem contradictory that all these things are happening simultaneously, but we know that in Krishna's pastimes, uh, even though the same pastime is taking place, all the details of the pastime may be different, and they may add to the enjoyment of those of us who are trying to penetrate into this transcendental reality, those of us who are reading about the Supreme Lord, who are hearing from self-realized souls, and Krishna is constantly changing everything and making everything newer and fresher and more delectable. With sweating face, Kamsa glared at Krishna and stopped the music with his left hand, and all the instruments began playing on their own. I'm still reading Jiva Goswami's commentary. This means music again sounded, though Kamsa stopped it. He stopped it on the pretext of speaking so that his words could be heard. He spoke clearly. Kamsa was king of some people of the Bhoja dynasty, a branch of the Yarus, but now everyone held him in this respect. Now the mindset of those who were observing these pastimes was changing. They could see how his power was diminishing in the sense that his great elephant had been killed, his wonderful, restless, powerful personalities are undefeatable had been killed, and that he was completely absorbed in anger and in absolute terror. And by those sentiments, you could see that he had no power, very little power left. It's completely diminished. And Srila Sanatana Goswami says, his best wrestlers had been killed. Others had quickly others had quickly fled in fear far away. He stopped his instruments but could not stop the heavenly instruments according to Vishnu Purana. Or according to Shukadev, the devatas out of fear of Kamsa did not have instruments. So there are so many different versions. Like I said, it seems contradictory, but everything is possible depending on what pastime, how he's presenting the pastime. Kamsa alone had instruments to inspire his wrestlers with a desire for victory. Because his desire was thwarted, he stopped the music. He revealed his wicked nature by his words. He spoke clearly so that everyone could hear his instructions. Actually, he spoke with internal suffering. And when a person speaks with internal suffering, I would say that most people can perceive that there is suffering going on in that person. There's something that is untoward that this person is experiencing, and his expression of whatever he's trying to say is completely tinted by this mentality and these experiences, these emotional experiences. Actually, he spoke with internal suffering. He informed the Bhojas, who were his followers, that he had to give instruction to his followers. He rules because of some portion of the Yarus called Bhojas. So that's the end of the commentaries by Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. So being quite curious about the subject of music and really enjoying music. Music is all pervading. It's like the ether that pervades everything, like water that flows everywhere, like air is always present. Music is always present. And so we see that in our tradition, music is extremely important because everything that is written can be sung. I would talk about Gita, Bhagavad Gita, for example, to begin with. These are verses that can be sung. And so many of these, not to mention the bhajans, of course, are different forms of poetry. But in the Gopal Champa, for example, there are many songs too. And music is always there. And Srila Prabhupada said that the three most important elements for our practice were singing, dancing, and prasadam. So are we in good shape? Singing, dancing, of course, singing is music, dancing is because of the music, and then feasting, the prasadam. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the musicians in the higher planets, and these are the Gandharvas. The dancing girls, they usually come together. Some of them are singing, the Gandharvas, some of them, the dancing girls, the Apsaras dance. So in Srila Prabhupada's purport to Canto 3, chapter 20, verse 38, he writes, the musicians in the upper planetary systems are all called Gandharvas, and the dancing girls are called Apsaras. After being attacked by the demons and evolving a form of a beautiful woman in the twilight, Brahma next created Gandharvas and Apsaras. Music and dancing employed in sense gratification are to be accepted as demoniac. But the same music, back, press the wrong button. But the same music, when employed in glorifying the Supreme Lord as kirtan, are transcendental. The same music and dancing, two things. When employed in glorifying the Supreme Lord as kirtan, are transcendental, and they bring about a life completely fit for spiritual enjoyment. So I would like to ask the devotees here, is music an important element of our practices? Is it something that gives us pleasure? I was reading this morning something, a quote, and I'll come back to this because we're talking about music in the spiritual world. From a lady who's called Anne-Sophie Mutter, which is a well-known German violinist, who knows the kind of magic that these moments of playing in an orchestra can create. And this is a quote. I just saw this early before I came to the temple. She says, music is a way to live in a parallel universe without cerebral damage. Music is a way to live in a parallel universe without cerebral damage. I think that's very significant because why is Krishna the flutist? Why is Krishna holding the flute and playing the most incredible melodies? Why is Radha even surpassing the musical ability of Krishna? Why is music so important in the spiritual world? And why is music so important here? There are so many benefits for listening to music, but we have to remember what Srila Prabhupada said in this purport, that music, when employed in sense gratification, music and dance, when they are employed in sense gratification, are accepted as demoniac. But when they are employed in glorification of the Supreme Lord, they are glorious. Not only glorious, but most pleasing and most nourishing. So why are music and dance employed in sense gratification called to be demoniac? Anybody knows or can give an idea, express an opinion? Do you want to get a microphone? It's going to go around. And later on, somebody will want to say something. So we're going to go get another microphone so we can all, whoever's listening on internet can hear.
Anything done that's not done for Krishna is ultimately demoniac in the sense that it has no purpose other than sense gratification.
Okay, so anybody else has comments? Prabhuji, Arjun.
I think also.
Can you speak louder?
Yeah,
please?
I think also if there wasn't music and dancing, it would be very impersonal. And I think it's a very beautiful thing that it's there in a spiritual form because it's personal. It's like, wow, you get to experience
Such a good
in the
point.
spiritual world. Yeah.
Wonderful. What a great point that is. We need that. It's part of our expressing our emotions and expressing our wishes and desires. So if you hang on to it, then eventually somebody else will want to say something. So here there is the translation of from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, chapter 24, verse number 7. And this verse is At the time of his descent on earth, demigods in the form of raining clouds sounded musical instruments in the sky. How poetic this is. I'll repeat it. At the time of his descent, Supreme Lord's descent, uh, demigods in the form of raining clouds sounded musical instruments in the sky. The celestial musicians, the Gandharvas, sang the glories of the Lord, while celestial dancing girls known as Apsaras danced in joyful ecstasy. That's the power of music, transcendental music. In the case, for example, of Emperor Swayambhuva Manu, he was also employing the service of singers and dancers because kings needed to be glorified, and they were glorified with poetry in the form of sung poems and with the dancing girls. So this is the translation of this verse from Canto 3, chapter 22, verse 33. Emperor Swayambhuva Manu enjoyed life with his wife and subjects and fulfilled his desires without being disturbed by unwanted principles contrary to the process of religion. Celestial musicians and their wives sang in chorus about the pure reputation of the emperor, and early in the morning, every day, he used to listen to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a loving heart, and these pastimes were recited and were sung also. So we employ music in the service of the Supreme Lord, and it's the most delectable form of worshiping the Supreme Lord. We can worship the Supreme Lord by scrubbing pots or cleaning toilets, perfect, and also by playing musical instruments and by music, by singing. There's so many examples. Now, Srila Prabhupada says, if you are a musician, this is from the purport to Canto 10, chapter 12, verse 34. Everyone has some particular duty. The Shastra has concluded that everyone should glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his own qualifications. If you're a singer, always glorify the Supreme Lord by singing very nicely. If you're a musician, glorify the Supreme Lord by playing musical instruments. Swanushthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam, which is this verse from the Bhagavatam 1 to 13 about how the perfection of life is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is the motto that we need to live by. How can I satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead? With my words, with my mind, with my body, with my actions. And so when we come to the temple for Srimad Bhagavatam class, then our duty and our pleasure is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. There is no other purpose. I remember when I was a child and I was raised in a Roman Catholic church, and we used to go to the chapel or to the church on Sundays, but to the chapel every single day, twice, Monday through Saturday. And there was a sense of such respect. It was very silent in the sense that we would go in very quietly. And then, of course, there were all these things going on, singing of hymns and mass and all that stuff. But it was such a sacred spot. It was such a sacred environment that it was so conducive to prayer, to meditation, to glorification of the Supreme Lord. And this is the sacred space. We are in Vrindavan right now, in front of the deities. This is a sacred spot. And our duty and pleasure when we come to this sacred spot is to exclusively glorify the Supreme Lord. So, the perfection of life, this is from 1 to 13, is to satisfy the personality of Godhead. Therefore, beginning from this earth up to the celestial kingdom, everyone engaged in glorifying the Supreme Personality, anybody is engaged in glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The decision of all great saintly persons is that whatever qualifications one has acquired should be utilized to glorify the Supreme Lord. In fact, everything that we have of that we are good at, like maybe painting or designing buildings or composing music or writing literature, everything has been given us. It's a gift. It's a gift. We don't own it. Supreme Lord has given it to us. For what purpose? To glorify Him with that ability. The person who paints beautiful paintings is a gift that the Supreme Lord has given him or her so that they can represent scenes of the spiritual world. And when they paint, they are absorbed in thoughts of how they are going to be present these pastimes, which is another form of worship, to be absorbed in meditating on the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. There's a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Murari on Vrindavan 3rd, August of 1967. And I think it's a very telling letter. Due to that, Due to that, I became indisposed and was obliged to stay there for 3 or 4 extra days. I have now come to Vrindavan on the 31st, and I'm staying at the Radha Damodar temple. Remember, this is 1967. You have inquired about the import of Murari Das because he's writing to a disciple whose name is Murari. Murari is another name for Krishna. Therefore, one who is pledged to become the servant of Krishna is called Murari Das. I am so glad you're playing music for Krishna. It is a great service of your talent. Anyone's special talent should be engaged in the service of the Lord and thereby become successful in his life. What a wonderful way of becoming successful by doing those things that we know how to do, right? By using these propensities in the service of the Lord. I think that you can go on playing on your guitar, 1967. I think that you can go playing on your guitar and make it successful for Krishna Kirtan. So no, Kirtan, a guitar is not something that is just being introduced recently. And some people may frown upon that. But it's interesting because we read that in the spiritual world, the most important instruments are string instruments. And in the Bible, it says that people are to glorify the Supreme Lord with hymns, also with prayers, and using harp, lyre, and kartas, cymbals. Again, string instruments and percussion. What time is it? Okay. So, you do not require to learn freshly about sitar. We're not meant for learning something new for the service of the Lord, but we have to engage whatever talents we have already. Our life is short, but any type of education is great and long. So the best part of valor is to properly utilize whatever qualifications we have got for the service of the Lord. And then he makes second session by saying to this devotee, if you still think that you want a sitar, I will request you to make correspondence with Mr. Dwarkin and Sons, Esplanade, Calcutta. So Srila Prabhupada, right from the beginning, is encouraging people to use their abilities and, in this case, musical abilities. So there's so much to be said, and we know that there was music played when Krishna was born. There was music played when Lord Chaitanya appeared. So I'm going to read this verse, which is Chaitanya Charitamrita, Canto 1, Chapter 13, verses 106 and 107. I'm going to read this one. In outer space, this is the birth of Lord Chaitanya. In outer space, all the demigods, including the inhabitants of Gandharva Loka, Siddha Loka, and Charana Loka, offered their prayers and danced to the accompaniment of music, songs, and the beating of drums. Similarly, in our Dweep city, all the professional dancers, musicians, and blessers gathered together, dancing in great jubilation. And I don't know if you're familiar with this poet Rumi, who's from the 13th century, so Sufi, was a theologian, erudite scholar, and he was completely dissatisfied with his knowledge, and he wanted to undergo or take up the process of the heart. And he said, of the many ways to approach, there are many ways of approaching the Supreme Lord and making contact with the Supreme Lord. But I choose the way of singing, dancing, and laughter. So we have it. In all traditions, we have the singing and the dancing. It's most pleasing, most pleasurable. It's just natural for us too, because when we are in the spiritual world, and we see that when we read about the personalities in the spiritual world, they're always singing and dancing. They're always enjoying the worship of the Supreme Lord in the way of singing and dancing. And we have this verse from the Brahma Samhita also. It's verse 56. And I'll read it. Everybody's familiar with it, I think, but it's so very beautiful. It was worthwhile reading again. I skip the Sanskrit. I worship that transcendental seed known as Shwetadvip, where loving consorts, the Lakshmis, in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover, where every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gate is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant, effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty. What a good word to use, tasty. Enjoyable, we understand, and tasty is delectable. Everything about the spiritual world is delectable, tasty. And of course, we know that Srimati Radharani is the tastiest of all. So I'm going to complete the class. I don't know how much time we have. There is a lot of reference to music here in this Ananda Vrindavan Champa by Kavi Karnapur, and there is a chapter that is called Krishna's Flute, the pastimes of stealing Krishna's flute. So I'm going to read some of it so we can all be delighted with the author. Does anybody have anything to say in the meantime? Any comments to make? Okay. It's chapter 21, the pastimes of stealing Krishna flute. I'll read a few things. The Kahar boys and their associates sang lovely songs in Dvipadika and Charchari Thala. Their traditional Vraja Bas songs sounded as pleasing as the smell of musk. The accompaniment of kartals and sweet mirdanga enhanced the charming vibration of their bangles and ankle bells. Everything is creative music, not only the musical instruments. Krishna and Balaram played in this way for a long time, and then wandered around in the lonely forests, pleasant with rows of young trees. So there's a lot of reference here about music, so let me skip a few things. For some time, Baladev, who is a talented artist, danced to the beat of songs in charchas and Dvipadika. Appearing like the personification of bliss, Balaram sang, laughed, and threw kumkum powder on his beloved gopis, as if sprinkling the sindoor of love on their foreheads. So this is the pastime of Holi. Krishna, meanwhile, I'm going in certain sections. Krishna, meanwhile, defeated the gopis' long-standing pride of their singing skill by playing sweetly but indistinctly on his flute. The gopis responding by surrounding Krishna and dousing him with kumkum, while their bangles jingled joyfully. While tolerating the showers of kumkum, Hari hung his head down submissively, like the best of youthful, intoxicated elephants, and continued playing his flute song in Charcharitala. As Krishna playfully moved with heroic steps, he met with Balaram, who rambled about like an intoxicated elephant, along with his own group of enraptured young gopis. Kusumasava said, that's a friend of Sri Krishna. Oh friend, I cannot protect the flute as much as the person who has given you the ability to attract everyone by the special power of his mantra. But one cannot see such a person in this world. So what is the question of someone trying to take your flute? Do not mistrust a dear friend like me. And Krishna replied, what will you do if the intensely frenzied gopis, due to being overpowered by bliss, just snatch the flute from your hand? How will you get it back? Now the gopis have taken Krishna's flute. And so Kusumasama said, I cannot do anything. And Krishna says, what would you do if that happened to you? Kusumasava replied, you will see the power I have gained from your presence. Then taking the flute and tucking it under his arm, he said, please sing a song. In a voice conquering the sound of the veena, Krishna sang a song in Charcharitala with great artistry. And look what happens when he is singing. The Yamuna stopped flowing in her stunned condition. The trees rained tears, and the birds and animals trembled in ecstasy. Hearing the song, the does felt blissful and licked up the drops of perspiration behind each other's ears. It seemed that the streams of sweetness from Krishna's song entered the ear holes of the deer and then oozed out due to finding insufficient space. The expertly composed raga pleased the ear due to its precise shrutis, jatis, and 7 notes. And there is so much more in this book about music and playing for the Supreme Lord and the singing of the Supreme Lord and his playing of the flute. So if anybody would like to make a comment, I think it's almost time. We have 3 minutes? We still have 3 minutes? Okay, so who would like to make a comment? Maybe Chidra? By request, I'll continue reading. If I can find the page again. So apparently we have a few more minutes left. Sangita Vidya, a learned Gopi musician, said, oh, an intelligent one. If Lalita, who's wearing a gorgeous silk sari, can sing better than Krishna, then crooked-minded fellow, so you, crooked-minded fellow, will use the flute. Let the flute be the wager. Kusumasava said, O learned one, only I know the science of music. It is difficult for an ordinary person to know, even if engaged in constant meditation on the subject. According to my final judgment, I will proclaim the winner at the appropriate time. Now this is a contest. Who is doing a better job at singing? This will please the devatas and be agreeable to all. Sangita Vidya, Sangita, of course, a very proper name, right? Sangita, full of music. O learned Brahmana boy, this is not simply chanting the Vedas, which satisfies the Vedic scholars. Who are you to judge this? While smiling, Krishna continued singing and hinted with a glance. Understanding his intentions, Kusumasava said, O vain woman, if you do not agree that my knowledge of music is sufficient for judging, then we should agree that the singing of both parties is equal. That was the party of Radharani and Krishna, right? Let us see if your singing, like Krishna's, can stun the Yamuna water bring tears to the trees and creepers, and make the birds and animals tremble in ecstasy. I am certain that no one can sing as zestfully as my friend. Therefore, we will wager the flute. If you want to gamble over the singing, then, to be fair, you must offer Radha as a wager from your side. And Lalita said, "Oh, stupid boy, a fool makes the whole world insipid. In all gambling matches, the stakes must be of equal value. We can never equate glass with gold." Kusumasava, who is the master musician, responded, he thinks he knows everything about music. "Oh, worshipable one, do you think that my dear friend's flute is like glass and that your friend is like gold?" Lalita answered, "Is there any doubt? If you want equal stakes, then without fear, you should wager your friend." Kusumasava said, "All right then, begin singing. Since I'm totally pure in heart, I will wager my friend." And this is the end of today's reading. So I encourage everybody to read this Ananda Vrindavan Champu. It's an incredibly tasty, delightful, poetic, and musical book. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Enam Kanbandha Aravindadalaya Tatam Bhagavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundaratam Kandar Akom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobha. Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Andani Asasakalem Priya Priti Manti Vasyam Vipa Vikayanti Gira Praganti Ananda Maya Sadu Jala Vigrasya Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Namah Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Hari
Dana Rajabara Nagara Gokula Ranakana Yasomatina Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Madana Manohara Kaliya Damana Vidana Kaliya Damana Vidana Kaliya Damana Vidana Kaliya Damana Vidana Amala Harina Mamiya Vilasa Amala Harina Mamiya Vilasa Amala Harina Mamiya Vilasa Mamiya Vilasa Vipinam Porandara Navina Nagara Bara Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Porandara Navina Nagara Bara Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Porandara Navina Nagara Bara Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Porandara Vamsivadana Vasa Rajajana Palana Surakula Nashana Jabana Palana Surakula Nashana Rajajana Palana Surakula Nashana Jabana Palana Surakula Nashana Nanda Godana Rakulaya Nanda Go Rakulaya Nanda Godana Rakulaya Nanda Rakulaya Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Vanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Navanita Taskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasana Hara Rajara Sika Kripa Moya Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasana Hara Rajara Sika Kripa Moya Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasana Hara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Tatachara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Sri Radha Bala Vrindavana Nata Bara Sri Radha Bala Vrindavana Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nata Bara Sri Radha Vallabha Nata Bara Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Yasomati Nandana Rajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Yasaradina Rajapara Gokula Ranjana Kana Amala Harinam Ami Abilasa Amala Harinam Ami Abilasa Amala Harinam Ami Abilasa Amala Harinam Ami Abilasa Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Sri Radha Vallabha Navana Natabara Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Ashraya Bhakati Vinoda Ashraya Bhakati Vinoda Ashraya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Golokananda Radha Golokananda Radhe Jaya Nanda Radha Golokananda Radha Jaya Radha Golokananda Radha Golokananda Radhe Jaya Radha Golokananda Radha Nanda Radha Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jai Shri Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Srila Prabhupada ki jai Shri Shri Gornitai ki jai Shri Shri Radha Golokananda ki jai Gaur Premanandi Lord Krishna is beloved son of Yashoda, transcendental lover in the land of Braj, the delight of Gokula, known by the nickname Kana, the wealth of the lives of the gopis, the attractor of Cupid, and punisher of the serpent Kalia. These pure holy names of Lord Hari are full of sweet nectarian pastimes. Lord of the 12 forests of Braj, ever youthful, the best of lovers, player of the flute, an excellent dresser, protector of the inhabitants of Braj, destroyer of demoniac dynasties, keeper and tender of Nanda's cows, giver of pleasure to cows, land, and spiritual senses, husband of the goddess of fortune, butter thief, and beautiful little cowherd boy of Nanda Maharaj, wanderer of the Ramuna riverbanks, thief of the garments of the gopis, enjoyer of the mellows of the rasa dance, very merciful, lover and beloved of Sri Radha, the great dancer of Vrindavan, and the only shelter of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Chaitodarpana marjanam bhava mahabdavagni nirvapanam Shreyakai Radhanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratyanam Vernam Rita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijaya Deshi Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Itani Amita Smarane Nakala Etad Rishita Bakripa Bhagavan Mama Trinada Pi Sunichena Tarora Pi Suhishuna Amani Namana Dana Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvare Bhavatad Bhaktir Hoitaki Twai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitamam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja Stita Duli Sadrashim Vachintaya Nayanam Galadishu Daraya Varanam Gadgada Hridaya Gira Pulakarnishitam Vapukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Yugayatam Namishena Chakshusha Pravashayatam Shunayatam Jagat Sarvam Govindam Virahename Ashlishyavapadamritam Panastumam Adarshanam Marmahata Karotuva Yatata Vavantolam Patomat Prananatastu Saivanapara. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you've invested all your transcendental energies. They're not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Oh, my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he's always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Shikshastika Ki Jai.